Hello, everybody. This is a very special evening for us. Also because this is evening about human rights. And I personally represent the position that we recognize human rights, we discover human rights in the process of direct experience of their violation. So this is the special case of this region, special case of bloodlands, special case of the 20th century of Eastern Europe, and also the case of Ukraine now, that people personally and situationally recognize values, certain values and human rights by their own life and in direct experience, in direct interaction with repression. And people who experience repression, imprisonment, and they are witnesses or victims, are very important human beings who tell us about values. And this is why this conversation this evening with Maksym Butkevych is important for us.
And I will add this second layer of this discovering what does it mean to fight for values, for Europe, for Ukraine. And this is this East European experience that we need to listen to these stories, need to recognize it, because then we understand what Russia really is, and there are no discussions who attack whom. Yes, it's like that. This true. I think it's this paradox of what we sometimes in Western Europe we appreciate very much, and we know how important to fight for these human rights, for all these freedom aspects, values. But it has, I mean, also very concrete face, like the violence. And we are, I mean, I was today thinking this third year, and so much difficult happened, and it's more and more dangerous, and we face the threat. We support Ukraine because they fight for freedom, they fight for us, they fight for free Europe. But we see that we need to understand perhaps more and better nowadays. And I hope that this today evening, in context of Vasyl Stus, who was it's absolutely incredible, this connection between fighting for Ukrainian identity, in the end, is very much connected with this fight for human rights. And it's huge honor for us, for Pilecki-Institut, that we can with Vice organize today evening and welcome our amazing guest hero, Maksym Butkevych. Welcome.
So, thank you, Maksym, for joining us, for coming in the line of a lot of events happening around and spending this evening with us with the memory of Vasyl Stus. And I will just shortly introduce you once again. I know that probably you're tired of this introduction, but I think this introduction also recalls us what makes this event quite special in the notion of this dialogue, or not dialogue, the reflection of also Stus' life and what it means for Stus back then, try to understand from the prison, from the perspective of knowing how it is to fight and to define your identity as such. So that's why, once again, I will read your short introduction. Maksym Butkevych is a Ukrainian human rights activist, journalist, and co-founder of the Zmina Human Rights Center. After the start of Russia's full-scale invasion in Ukraine in February 24, 2022, Maksym joined the armed forces of Ukraine and was taken prisoner a few months later. On 18 October 2024, he returned to Ukraine as part of prisoner exchange. After rehabilitation, Butkevych joined the Center for Civil Liberties, a Ukrainian human rights organization who is also holds Nobel Prize. Is everything correct in the description?
Yes, it is.
Should I add something?
Well.
Today event name was chosen by the term created by Vasyl Stus. And this event is also quite special, and I would say from my personal perspective, because you was free a couple days after as we opened this exhibition, and as we worked on this exhibition, it was the knowledge, the wish, the hope that other prisoners, also human rights activists, those who decided to fight, that they would be free. Definitely is many names who are still in prison, civil prisoners of war, which should be free, but to read that you were exchanged, it's kind of like the sign that we are doing everything right until we are not stopping to remember, not stopping to fight. And I think this term, which I recall, the feeling oneself with oneself, in Ukrainian it sounds само собою наповнювання. That originates from Vasyl Stus' reflection on human existence, self-realization, and survival under condition of oppression. Stus saw survival not merely as physical endurance, but as a process of internal self-formulation. I will just quote him now. And consciousness, active feeling of oneself with meanings that go beyond that individual, but at the same time define oneself inner world. It sounds definitely quite challenging, especially with my pronunciation, but today we will go through this term in this understanding how and with what we are feeling oneself when we are detached or when we are pushed in this physical, not typical conditions, as you yesterday said, that freedom is quite, that's typical space of human being. The prison is vice versa of it. And again, recalling, and I will try to stop me not to compare Vasyl Stus and your life. Definitely, we are much more lucky to have you back, and that the next exhibition, next generation who will be creating the exhibition about you, you will join this for the opening, and would be answering all questions directly. But when we are thinking about this days of Vasyl Stus, he was a political prisoner, also as a human rights activist in one moment, but state didn't exist. Ukraine as a state didn't exist. So what would we say about state? We can definitely criticize different states, our own states, we like this. But the state which also fighting for you, that was different in your history. And quite often now, especially when we are speaking with the young activists, they like to detach themselves from the state, detach themselves from the politics, to say culture beside the politique, everything beside politics. So we don't want to be too political. We want to fight for something and not to involve in the politic. And as kind of also anarchist, how do you reflect now this notion of having state behind your back or fighting against your state?
Well, this is not an easy question, of course. But in the first place, thank you very much for invitation to this event, for organizing it. Thank you all for being here, and I'm really happy to be here. Tonight, I'm happy to be in Berlin. It's one of the cities I love, and one of those cities I recalled quite often while in captivity. You know, it's one of the techniques, basically, when you are in jail and your space is limited to your cell. Prisoners of war are not even taken out for short walks. They are just kept inside their cells most of the time, except interrogations. Later on, I was luckier. I was able to walk around for 1 hour per day. And even later, when I was transferred to the colony, it was even easier because I was convicted on fabricated criminal case to 13 years of penal colony of strict regime. So I was lucky in this way. Yeah, one just to keep your memory and your imagination and your mental capabilities alive. One of the techniques was to recall different places I've been to, not probably even physically, because frankly speaking, I don't remember the city as such. I don't remember the transportation system or how to get from point A to point B, but I remembered certain imaginary, and I remembered the feeling from the city. And Berlin was one of the most often recalled places, actually, on that. And coming back to your question, well, yes, I have an anarchist background, and it's not, but I can easily imagine that, you know, there will be some contemporary anarchists who would say that I am not the one, I'm not true. I don't mind, actually. I don't care that much. To me, it's not the labels which define what is really important, but it is what we do and what the consequences of our actions are. The results of it, or the fruits which we bring, speaking in the language of New Testament. Yeah, I don't cling to the notion of being anarchist or something. But to me, what is probably different from the, well, probably classical anarchism of 19th, beginning of 20th century, is that the problem is not the state. The state might be or can be the manifestation of it. The problem lies much deeper in the desire to subjugate the others, in the issue of power and control, and on the other hand, desire of other people to be subjugated, to give away their freedom and therefore their responsibility for what is going on. And it is manifested itself not only in certain periods of time in state structures, but in many other forms of domination and subjugation, and basically dehumanization of people, because human being without an ability to make a choice, without freedom to choose and to influence his or her own destiny, change the situation, is not exactly a human being, because I think this is one of those features which define us as being human. Of course, you know, as a human rights defender, I was called so many times. Human rights defenders mostly deal with situations when rights of an individual, of a human being, are violated by the state. This is a vertical conflict. So in a way, this is also an anarchist kind of activity, you know, to protect people from the machine, which was created at some point in time by people to find peaceful way of coexisting and co-creativity and maybe constructing their own future together. But in certain instances, it just became alienated and came in its own right as certain idol demanding human sacrifices. And to me, unfortunately, right now, the situation we all find ourselves in, it is embodied in the Russian world, in Pax Russica, because their ideology, which unfortunately I was able to research from inside, states this, that the state is everything and human being is nothing. It is just disposable material for the state. So suddenly what humans created with their own hands and minds took life of its own, trying to subjugate and control and kill those same people who created it. This is why I still hold, well, kind of anarchist worldview when it comes to worldview, but it is definitely not about being apolitical, because, well, it depends, of course, how we define politics and policies. But to me, policies and political realm is one of the dimensions where we express ourselves and where we define our own future all together, because we do most important things all together. And to me, freedom, like my freedom in particular, this particular freedom to come to Berlin and to be able to talk to you and to listen to you, it became possible thanks to the others, my other people, those who fought for me, those who negotiated for me, whose written texts about me, recalled me, shared stories, etc. And only thanks to them, and I'm filled so far up to now with incredible gratitude, I am free. So my freedom lies with the others. And I try to do my best so that someone else's freedom can also lie in my realm. So I'm part of other people being free. So we all define our common future. We define it in conflict, but in cooperation and coordination as well. We create it together. And as far as we understand, so far at least, human beings are the only species who are able to create something from nothing and to change the situation so that they can survive or live somehow differently. We started to do this when we emerged as biological species. We could not survive in the evolutionary circumstances. We didn't have claws or like teeth, etc. We had either to get extinct or to change our situation. We did it. So we continue to do that on different levels, as societies, as humankind, but also individually in cooperation with the others. And one of manifestation of it is political realm. We do it in politics. So the old saying that everything is political, to me it is true, but not in terms of, party politics or ideological fight. It is about responsibility. We are responsible for what's going on with us and with other people in our societies and communities and in the world. We are responsible for that. Whether we do something, we are responsible for that. Whether we abstain from doing something, we are responsible for our inaction. And this is also something that motivated me, among other things, to join the armed forces of Ukraine, because I was responsible for what's going on, for the defense of my community. I regard Ukraine more as a community of people in the first place than as a state apparatus. People is something that matters to me. So I was responsible, and if I made different choice, I would be responsible for that, even for inaction. And I'm afraid that those people in Russia who within several years or maybe a couple of decades will unavoidably say, we're not responsible for what happened because we didn't do anything, we didn't go to war, we didn't work at the arms factories, we didn't even go to vote. So we are not responsible for that. To me, it is either lack of intellectual honesty, hypocrisy, or lack of understanding that it's not even about paying taxes, funding this war, and not even about the fact that this war is waged in the name of this community. But it is about you could do something, at least something, to stop it, and you didn't. And responsibility for this, in certain times, is even greater, maybe, than for the action. Yeah.
Thank you for covering a couple my question in the one answer, but I think it's it is very important to all the time remember this responsibility. Stus, I will just recall what I said on the end of the public curatorial tour, that for Stus was the most important notion to be human. And he thought about that as with also responsibility which comes with this. And this great biggest responsibility to be a human also coming with the responsibility to fight, to define, to engage in the, to not detach yourself from what is done in your community, in your group, which that or another when you're being part of this. When you said about people who fought for you, who give you, who were part of you being free. Have you mentioned and mean only those people right now, or also those people who in the past century or years also fought for this Ukrainian identity as such, as definitely you define yourself as Ukrainian, and that's quite political concept which is being created and which being shaped. Do you meant them when you mention those who helped you to be you, and how, to which extent it is important for you, this shaped political identity, or you continue to shape this now also?
Well, to me it is important, definitely, and while actual fight, contemporary one, fight of today, of course, came to my mind the first, while being in the cell, for instance, and for first months before the conviction, before the sentence, court sentence, so-called court sentence, we were held incommunicado. We didn't have any information from the outside world, and we couldn't communicate with anyone. I just was sure every minute when I thought about it that there are people out there who right now at this very moment do something about me and about other prisoners of war. And actually I had my brothers in arms, other POWs from time to time asking me, am I sure we're not forgotten? Because of course the guards and the administration, they tried to get us convinced that we are forgotten, that we are, used and and thrown away, that we are again disposal material. I tried to do the opposite, to convince my cellmates, other POWs, that this is not the case. I think this was actually one of the reasons why I've got transferred from bigger cell to a smaller one. Originally, they said I'm a bad influence. And I was, I really hope I was. I wanted to be. But when thinking deeper, yes, I recalled those who fought for things important to me before. These were not only Ukrainians, of course. There were a lot of people from around the world who shared concepts which are fundamental to me. Like later on in the colony, I think I mentioned it a couple of times before in other conversations. I finally got my hands on books because there was what remained of library in the penal colony. It was much richer at some point in time under Ukraine. Then, well, basically there were remnants, bits and pieces, but some books were there still. Sometimes one could find incredible book, really. And one of the first books I read was by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Was not Little Prince. Oh, it was Little Prince. Of course, I reread it. The best place to read The Little Prince is in prison, I should tell you. It's all about imagination, among other things, and also about a lot of internal processes. But it was there was another essay, a letter to a hostage, written by him to his friend who lived under Nazi occupation at the time. And de Saint-Exupéry, he expressed the main difference to him between Nazis and him and his comrades, his community, He said that the cornerstone of our politics and of everything in us is respect towards human being, like ultimate, fundamental respect towards the other, and this is something they lack. And to me, this is so Ukrainian thought, but Ukrainian when we talk about contemporary Ukraine and current Ukrainian situation. And of course, I thought quite a lot about Ukrainian dissident movement and Ukrainian liberation movement of the 20th century. Later on, I was lucky enough to meet, after being released, to see again Josip Zisels, whom I know for quite some time, and later on to meet Miroslav Marinovich. And we talked like two former political prisoners, like inmates. So there was even jargon used. How was it there? How was it here? Of course, there is a time gap. But both of them said that they hoped their experience is the part of the past, and they will not have to pass the torch or anything, whatever it is, to the new generation of political prisoners, a new generation of those who were imprisoned for their ideas, for their ideals, and for their beliefs, rather than any offenses they committed. And this is the case. So, well, with the main difference that this time it is done not by the state entity they live in, but by the aggressor state, by the invaders. But the very nature of political imprisonment was there. Also because, you know, to me, I was puzzled for some time, why actually do they bother to fabricate criminal cases against us? We are POWs, we are in captivity anyway, we are behind bars, we are deprived of liberty, and actually we were treated in quite harsh way, much harsher than those accused of criminal offenses. Everything was much worse and harder and more painful, actually. Why do they bother? But apparently it was important for them, not only for propaganda reasons, but they wanted to put people behind bars to set also an example as first of them, actually, the one who was the first to tell me, we'll convict you, we'll sentence you, we'll put you in jail. Naively, it was at the end of tough interrogation, and he was really unhappy about my responses. I refused to give an interview they wanted. And I said, well, there is nothing to sentence me for. I didn't do anything. And he said, it's not a problem. It's not. You all are criminals. All of you Ukrainian soldiers, you all are criminals just because you fought against us. This is enough. You dared to resist. Well, he didn't say the word resist, but you dared to take up arms against Russia. I said, Russia, which invaded our country. And he said, well, the fact that you are saying this makes you even more criminal. So basically, we needed to be passive, to surrender, and to shut up. And those who didn't do that were criminals by design for them. And yeah, this is definitely a political thing. This is political case. And yeah, among other people whom I recalled was Vasyl Stus. I recalled him in the prison and then in the colony quite often.
In which condition? As a prisoner, as a poet, human rights activist, or quite self-confident in the very difficult times to have this belief that you're doing everything what should be done. And as there is like on the last surface, there is quote by Vasyl Stus, which he will write in 72, that he know that the next generation and his his family, his future generation will understand the importance of his poetry. Which part of the Stus being Stus have you recalled in the imprisonment?
Well, I think these were several at the same time. To me, they blended, they merged. Him as a prisoner, as a political prisoner, him as a dissident, someone who hold on to his ideas and beliefs and values as a poet, of course, and as a free human being, because he was free under any circumstances. All of these sides of his or representations of his were of extreme importance for me. And frankly speaking, I'm not very much into, well, not as much as some of my friends, into poetry, but poetry of Vasyl Stus was important. And in captivity, strange things happened to memory, especially, again, first months and months where we haven't got access to any written or published texts, or didn't have a paper or a pen, or basically didn't have anything at all. And there is very limited information, well, flow, it's not a flow, very, very, very limited information at all coming from outside. Your memory starts to bring back things you thought are long forgotten. Then you forget some of them again, but it will be later. And some of Stus's poems actually were recalled, came back in there, and I read some of them to my co-inmates, to my cellmates, which was interesting to have some sort of poetry reading in Luhansk prison, in the part for POWs. So yes, it was important. All of these sides, I could not separate one of them from the other. No.
Can I ask you to read this poetry, because I feel that this talk right now kind of meditation, and now is the time to read this poetry, because when you mention something, then this something should appear on the stage.
Okay, well, but I have to help my memory, if you don't mind.
Of course,
yeah.
I can speak meanwhile, or you.
Yeah, please do. And in Ukrainian then.
Yes, I do believe that the poetry doesn't. Okay, that's very nice that we have German translation, and I hope we will have more translation of Stus' work. But poetry is something which not necessarily needs this translation. Sometimes it's about the sound, and most important, it's about the voice who is reading this poetry. So I will not read German translation of this poetry, but you can go take catalog and find this poetry there with the help of Ukrainian reading person. A few more seconds. Okay. And definitely I think, and it's very interesting because also when we go through the first imprisonment of Stus or the second one or the whole court process, it's very interesting, even despite this full dictatorship back then in Soviet Union, they also needed to create this so-called court to fabricate the cases, to fabricate the witnesses, to push people to go to court, to also to bring so-called lawyers. And that's the notion of the system which still tried to contain this systematic execution or prosecution in itself, making the system much more bigger and trying to again and again to remind the individual that they doesn't mean nothing. I remember in one discussion you said that for them state means everything and individuals nothing. And I think it's quite the way to which you go as the dictatorship and also as the totalitarian regime, which also doesn't start with the small step, with the bigger, with the big jump. It's more about the small step, and that's, I think, that the most important, this notion of the political engagement. It's a German one. That's a present for you. Wow, you have incredible vyshyvanka. That's definitely theater starting. No, of course. I think it's the best time.
Yeah, so yeah, just few poems which I found, yeah, maybe later on I'll just mention how comes when I became first interested in Stus and how it happened. To me, it was one of the signs of the time. But of course, these particular poems, they were as much about the conditions he was in when he created them as about something we went through or we could witness inside the Russian system. Отак живу, як мавпа серед мавп. Чолом прогрішним і ставром зажури, все б'юся об тверді камінні мури, як їхній раб, як ниций раб. Повз мене ходять мавпи чередою, у них хода поважна, не швидка, сказитись легше, ніж будь собою, бо ж ні зубила, ані молотка. О Боже праведний, важка докука, сліпорожденним розумом збагнуть. Ти в цьому світі лиш кавалок муки, отерплий і розріджений, мов ртуть. Це з 1968 року. Терпи, терпи, терпець тебе шліфує, сталить твій дух, тож і терпи, терпи. Ніхто тебе з недолі не врятує, ніхто не зіб'є з власної тропи. На ній і стрій, допоки скону, допоки світу й сонця, стій і стій. Хай шлях до раю, пекла чи полону усе пройди і винести зумій. Торуй свій шлях, той, що твоїм назвався, той, що обрав тебе на віки вік. До нього змалку ти заповідався, до нього сам Господь тебе прирік. That was the poem which, well, I mean, if I was talented enough, I could have written something with this content, with this substance. And even that he used the word captivity was so telling. And another thing is that the notion of patience is so important inside captivity. Every single POW I talked to, actually, those who reflected upon their situation, they confirmed what I thought, that two main notions in captivity are hope and patience. Patience not in terms of only waiting for release, but endurance, kind of an ability to endure what you are going through, of course without losing the most important things like dignity and ability to hope, to think, to believe. So this poem was really important. And two more. Весь обшир мій 4×4. Куди не глянь, то мур, куток і ріг. Всю душу з'їв цей шлак лілово-сірий, це плетиво заламаних доріг. І дальше смерті, рідна батьківщина, колодязь, тин і два вікна сумні, що тліють у вечірньому вогні. І в кожній шибі, ніби дві жарини, журливі очі вставлено. Це ти, о пресвята моя зисиця мати, до тебе вже шляхів не напитати і в ніч твою безсонну не зайти. Та жди мене, чекай мене, чекай, нехай і марне, але жди, блаженна, і Господеві помолись за мене. А вмру, то й з того світу виглядай. And the next one was recalled for some reason, probably the most often. Also very well known. На однакові квадрати поділили білий світ. Рівне право всім страждати і один терпіти гніт. Зле і кату, зле і жертві, а щасливого нема. Всім судилося померти за замками сімома. Отаке ти людське горе, отака ти чорна хлань, демократія покори і свобода німувань. А кругом життя веселе, скільки сонця і тепла. Ти мене даремно, леле, в світ неправди привела. And of course, you know, these poems, especially the last one, they were not about, well, they were to an extent about the world, the human existence, but they were in the first place and foremost about the Russian world. It was so exactly depicting the Russian world we were living in, we were forced to live in, and it didn't really matter that much whether it's in a penitentiary, or whether it's about people who live kind of free in Russian society, because from my conversation with those who lived under Russian occupation, not being pro-Ukrainian actually, they depicted this world, very similar terms, even sometimes talking about experiences free human beings who were not free at all. And this world of hypocrisy, world of lies, this was one of the main impressions probably from that system. And to me, of course, it was important to see that this is the system, this is the world view which they tried to bring to Ukraine on their bayonets and with their arms in this genocidal war.
And as we see through the Stus story, not for the first time, and not for the first century as well. I think it's very honest, finally, near the exhibition of Stus, we also read in poetry, because for Stus was the most important to be a poet, first of all. He always fought to have a chance to write. And I think it's also very important to look for this new perspective on seeing him, on reading him as well. You mentioned, and we will definitely talk about Stus returning back to public space in Ukraine, that in Ukraine it would be much more known person. But before we will go to something back then, something right now, how have changed your perception on Stus after being imprisoned? And also, as you said, that Little Prince you recommend to read in prison, kind of prepare yourself, Germany. But it's also about this notion of having this particular your life experience, which is changing your perspective on something which you know before, but this practical giving you new angle. What was for you about this?
Okay, then, well, actually, I don't advise to read Little Prince in jail, no, because I don't recommend to go get inside the jail. It's not, you know, it's one time is one too many, believe me. But if you find yourself suddenly in the read books, they help to keep yourself together. You know, apart from that, I reread 1984 in prison. Suddenly they had the first publication of Orwell's 1984. It was published in 1990, still in Soviet Union, so this book was still there, and it was hidden by the librarian. It was not openly on the shelf, it was just stuck somewhere, you know, behind. And the inspectors who from time to time checked the books, they just didn't know what it is. They've seen that this is some Soviet, I think German publishing enterprise, 1990, Soviet Union, whatever it is, 1984. So it survived at least until a certain moment in time. I love the book. I read it many times in different translations and in original. But that was kind of special, rereading. Or I finally managed to quietly, on slow pace, read in translation, of course, Michel Foucault's Observe and Punish, The Birth of Prison. I did it, yes, I did it. It was very special, it was. So yeah, but of course, yeah, it's about perception. Perception changes. Sometimes not that much. You expect to see everything with different eyes. And no, actually not. But something changes, and some other things, they change significantly. I wouldn't say that I have a very different perception of Stus after than before, but of course, having this experience, which is not the same he went through, penitentiary system changed, and even the one from so-called Luhansk People's Republic, which is extremely Soviet-like, it changed even as well. But the basic facts and notions and situation and conditions you find yourself in, they are the same, especially when it comes to most fundamental things. So yes, I read his poetry with new eyes, and even those poems I just recited, the 4 of them, I perceive him differently, and they're, as I said, well, basically, if I was talented enough to express myself in poetry and my experiences, that would be something similar, like in that direction. So, I mean, this is a shared experience now. I share this experience with him, and I'm honored, actually, because also, let's remember that it's not only that he found himself in jail, in captivity, of a sort, but he came out and he went back in full knowledge that if he doesn't stop his activities, he'll find himself back in prison again. And he knew that he has a very little chance to survive it. And he still decided to do that as a free person, although he felt that this is his path, as he described in the first poem I recited. This is the path which is probably the only one he can follow with dignity. I'm not sure I am able now to express in words what it meant to me, but I really felt it. So now I know more intimately what it is like. But so also some other things like, you know, these famous lines from his letter, one of his letters. If the times were different, I would not write poetry, but I would work on the land. I would farm the land. And we repeated so many times that if times were different, we would not be military, we would not fight, we would not be in jail, but we would. And then everyone just came up with his own answer. But this is like responding to the challenge of time. It's like about responsibility and ability to respond. What were you doing when these times came? And at the end of the day, keeping in mind where we were, and all of my captivity time I spent in the occupied part of Luhansk region. I wasn't taken to Russia proper. And we moved to that area as a unit, going through villages which had names of Oleksatykhy, were named after other dissidents, Ukrainian dissidents whose fate, as well as Stus's, is tied to Donbass. So to me also Stus is one of those figures who, you know, by his very existence, destroys all those absurd myths about Russian land which suddenly, temporarily found itself under Ukrainian control. One of the most talented, ingenious, modern poets of Ukrainian literature worked in Donbass and was part of that region, if not by birth, but by his part of his belonging, as well as some others. So it tells a lot about that land, and it tells a lot about how absurd are manipulations with history conducted by the Russian invaders. And when it comes to perception of other things, well, there are some changes, some are fundamental, something didn't change. And when I'm asked, for instance, whether my attitude towards human rights as a concept or as a values changed, well, changed only in a way that they became more significant to me, even more, especially now when they are under attack. But there are most fundamental things which slightly changed, and I cannot do better than to quote late Igor Kozlovsky, who actually has written a few things after his experience of being captured by pro-Russian proxy militia, and also spent more than 2 years in captivity, going through horrible tortures. He's written afterwards that freedom is different before captivity and after captivity. Before captivity, freedom is something that you take for granted. It is just part of your everyday life. It is like it just exists. Well, and yeah, it's a natural part. You are free to choose whatever in your everyday life, or maybe on some macro level. While after captivity, freedom is the most important thing you have, like the most important value. You treasure it. It is as important as maybe only other thing in your life, which is love. He has written, like freedom and love, you start to treasure. So the importance of something you took for granted, and then it was taken away from you, and then you regained it, but it is already on a different level. So these words I can just, support 100%. This is true.
Can we scale this to the sizes of Ukraine, the notion of Ukraine being in captivity, and that's why so much Ukraine is understanding what does it mean to be fighting for freedom?
Yeah, I think so. As well, well, we've heard it many times from different people and in different contexts, especially in recent years. Well, I haven't heard it for 2 years and a half because I haven't heard anything for 2 years and a half. But later on, I saw this being mentioned and written, and even before that, since actually 2014, that so many people, maybe younger ones, but not necessarily, took Ukraine for granted since 1991. It just existed, it just suddenly appeared, and it was a nice thing to have it. So yeah, okay, now it's Ukraine, and maybe it's a good thing it is Ukraine. It's not that it wasn't important, it was. But the real importance of it, many people for themselves, many people realized when suddenly they were in a situation when they could lose it. And apparently, given the course of actions, it meant automatically that they would lose their freedom to choose not only identity, political or ethnic or cultural, but to lose their everyday freedom of life, of choice, of agency. And for many people also that meant that they can lose liberty, go to jail, or lose their lives, pay with their lives, and many people actually did. So it became so intertwined, to defend Ukraine, to defend freedom, to defend identity, to defend your loved ones, and to defend liberty, that it is difficult and probably unnecessary at the moment to separate one from another.
Is this the reason why Vasyl Stus returned also to this public sphere? And that's also the question when, for the first time, you met Vasyl Stus, and if it was something exceptional or it was the way how you teach the Ukrainian literature?
Well, it was. I'm a Soviet kid, by the way. I'm old enough. I was in pioneer organization, all that thing. I remember it. And of course, I studied in Soviet school all years, but last 2 months, for 8 years, it was a Soviet school. And in the second half of 80s, there was a moment when prohibited literature started to come back. Ukrainian as well as Russian as well as other pieces. And of course also there was this famous anthology by Mykola Zhulinsky, Rozsтріляне відродження, like shut down Renaissance, right? Well, executed Renaissance, thank you. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Stus's poetry was for the first time published in Ukrainian literary magazine in 1988 or beginning of 1989. And my mom is a librarian. She worked at the library, and I spent quite a lot of time in the library in my childhood. So I happened to come across this issue of this magazine, and I was really impressed by these poems as a kid. Of course, I couldn't get some things, couldn't understand some of them, but others I could understand were striking emotionally, and they were somehow deep, very appealing to me. And then there was this presentation of this Executed Renaissance book. I came to attend it in the city somewhere in like bigger library. And at the end of it, the author of the anthology, like the compiler, Mr. Zhulinsky, who later on became state official, etc., etc., he answered questions from the audience. And I was in the audience. And I asked him, I came actually to him and asked him, you say that, you know, all these writers and poets, they should be taught in school. And I study in school. And don't you think that you will actually turn students, pupils away from these people, from these authors, given how we learn them? All this Soviet-like decomposition of the, you know, of the text, and yeah, basically turning it into boring, uninteresting material with this hypocritical so-called analysis, which was prevailing at the end of Soviet Union. I said, well, you basically will breed disgust towards them. Do you really want it? And he was puzzled. He didn't know what to answer. But actually I took it very closely to my heart. And later on, I managed to do a copy. At the time it was not easy. You know, all the copying machines were registered, and everyone who worked on them had to sign the obligation not to let anyone else to work on them. But I managed to make a copy. I think it was one of the first Xerox machines, or yeah, it doesn't matter. Of this part of the literary magazine, and I have sewn it together, and I put Stus's photo on the front. And it was my first Some with Dove, so first self-published thing. Not the last one though, but yeah, I didn't know the notion of Some with Dove at the time, of self-publishing, political self-publishing. But it was that. And later on I organized an event in school dedicated to Stus. Because, you know, we had very nice teacher of Ukrainian language and literature. She was really nice. But as all, I presume, most of Ukrainian language and literature teachers in Soviet schools, she was somehow constantly afraid of being accused of bourgeois nationalism. And once we had a scandal when we were obliged to learn by heart Maksym Butkevyk's poem, My Motherland, or My Fatherland, which was written in the 30s, in the darkest time, which was praising, you know, Soviet fatherland, etc., extremely hypocritical, and I just refused to recite it, saying that these are all lies. And it was terrible. There was a huge scandal, and the school director was there, and the head of party organization of the school was there, and I was reprimanded. And within probably a year and a half, I came to her, situation was already different, and said that, you know, by chance I met Vasyl Stus, who is Ukrainian dissident and member of Ukrainian Helsinki group. and friend and co-inmate of Vasyl Stus. They were in the same penal colony, and he actually was there when in the next cell Vasyl Stus passed away. And I met him by chance, again being just a kid, took his phone number and called him later on saying, does he mind to come to our school, talk about Stus? And he agreed happily. Then I came to my teacher and said that I talked to Vasyl Ovsienko and he wants to come and talk about Stus. And she was like, well, if Mr. Ovsienko wants to come, okay, who am I to object? I didn't say that it was me who wants actually to do that. But we had this event, and it was completely ordinary school. It was not something, you know, special, no. And we had this event, and it was very interesting. Yeah, it came to me quite early, and I think it changed my attitude and brought to me more interest in Ukrainian literature of the 20th century on one hand, and to the history of Ukrainian Helsinki movement, human rights movement, and Ukrainian liberation movement in general on the other hand. It was more or less all via, or at least mainly via Stus's poetry.
Wow, it's an incredible story. Thank you.
And very long one, yes, I know. I apologize for that.
It's definitely an incredible story, and the pleasure of meeting Vasyl Ovsienko. Now I understand more why you, as a child, went to the revolution, and this famous speech of yours, which is walking around all internet, worth seeing definitely, and I'm pretty sure it's been also translated into English, and. In Radomir Mokryk book about 60s movement, the newest one, he is recalling on his opening speech the incident which happened in the Lviv University, where also dissidents came to meet with the audience, with the youngster, and that he's analyzing this reflecting his feeling of young people not hearing to them properly. We can imagine how quite good it looked like. And it's quite painful. And that's very interesting. You're speaking right now, would assume 90s, probably 95, 96, 98. What happened between the Revolution of Dignity and that time that the young audience has lost this interest toward dissident, or they never had this interest?
Well, you know, my first experience was actually at the end of 80s and basically last year or two of Soviet Union and first years of independent Ukraine. At the time, dissidents attracted a lot of attention and like respectful attention. Not all of them though, and not from all sections of society, but it was important to listen what they have to say. Later on, I think there were several factors which might contribute to certain change. On one hand, Ukrainian liberation movement and dissident movement in general, it was not only Ukrainian, it was extremely diverse. And there were people of different beliefs and convictions in there, and of course with different kind of personalities and animosities among themselves and everything, as in every human collective or you know, movement or anything. And it is very, well, you know, someone is perceived in certain idealistic, might be perceived in certain idealistic light as long as you don't know that person more closely, and then it becomes more difficult. I'm aware of that, you know, very well. when I was released actually from captivity, and colleagues and friends of mine from Hromadske Radio, they did an interview with me, and they said that, you know, there is certain image of you now in this solidarity campaign. Have you had the chance to to find out what people think of you? And I just started, And I said, yes, and this seems to be quite an interesting person, but I'm afraid I won't be able to come even close to him because, you know, he's too nice for me and to kind of someone. But suddenly, yes, some of yesterday's dissidents turned out to be just human beings. Suddenly, with their strengths and weaknesses, with some of their ideas being of extreme importance, but some others being just I don't even know what to say. Strange, to put it weird, to put it mildly. Some apparently turned out not to stand in for liberty and democracy, but just for other, but still quite authoritarian models. Others turned out to be not ideologically, but in everyday life, xenophobes or racists. I don't. Now I'm speaking about individuals, you know. So people realized, young people realized that to be a former dissident not necessarily means to be a saint or to be right about everything. And yeah, it was kind of strange. At the same time, I think more important was that 90s, where it was quite a complicated period of time. And among other things, and I started my student activism in mid-90s. So that was next stage of my civic engagement. We tried to change things in the environment where most people actually ceased to believe that they can change anything. It was harsh time, it was difficult, it was poor, but also it was time of Leonid Kuchma's presidency, who since his second term especially started to slide towards authoritarian model, following Lukashenko and Nazarbayev and late Yeltsin actually. And a lot of people started to say we cannot change anything anyway. You know, we tried, it just happened, Soviet Union collapsed, fine, but then there were so many promises and expectations and they never came true. So if we try again, it might only make things worse. And here are these dissidents who actually contributed to the collapse of Soviet Union and who believed in democracy and human agency and dignity. And of course, some sections of society started to look at them with like, where is this dignity? Where is this democracy? Why did it happen? No, you were silly, you know, protesting the state because the state will have its way anyway. I think it was about socio-economic and political conditions. But then, with time, again, due to numerous factors, people started to regain their dignity, and then we had Ukraine Without Kuchma campaign, and then we had Orange Revolution, or Orange Maidan, and then all the developments led to Revolution of Dignity. So it came back, and it came back in full force, and again, it became obvious that people who fought for dignity and rights and freedom against all odds need to be respected for that, and of course need to be listened to critically, because, well, everyone has to be listened to critically, but need to be listened to. And I think this change, well, it took some years for it to happen, but it occurred at the end of the day, and this is where we are now.
Near the exhibition of Stus.
Yes.
Definitely, and very important notion to not go too much in glorifying someone, but see most of all a human, and with whom you can engage critically or just engage, not critically, but with some appreciation of some path which this person took in this moment. That's why I'm inviting you for the question. You can raise a hand and I will bring you a microphone. Oh my God, here I don't see. If there is any question. Okay.
Доброго вечора. Good evening. I'm very happy to see you here, as everyone. I have actually two questions. One question, I would come back to this 89 and you as 11 years old, 9, 10? Yeah. When Zuba gives you a microphone, Revolution on Granite, maybe not everyone knows about this movement, but somehow it makes line with the very first, as I understand, activism of yours, to call the school to come to support the students. And we can say that this was the beginning of a Ukrainian really hard movement for independence, this student revolution. Yeah, so I would like to know put more about it. And then the second question will be from another time, from today. I'm born Ukrainian, socialized in Germany, lived in East Germany, lived in Soviet Ukraine, lived in independent Germany, independent Ukraine, and but I really have problems to explain to people abroad why is impossible that Russia will be over Ukraine. You know, this is really stupid for us question, like why you just don't give up. It doesn't matter what flag do you have. But there are so many of this opinion, and not only from, like, I don't like this word normal people, or not, I mean, people. So how we can break through this mirror of a Russian illusion which was made up and which we like try to scratch, but it's like so hard. What you would be advising, I don't know, or with all your experience you had, how to scratch this mirror, or how to break it finally through this looking glass.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, with the first question, yes, right. I was 13 years old. It was 1990. It was that famous students' hunger strike at the central square of Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. It was the square of great Socialist October Revolution, which later on was renamed into Maidan of Independence, or Independence Square. But at the time, actually, informally, it already was called by many people in Kiev Maidan Nezalezhnosti, Maidan of Independence. And yeah, I was already pretty active. I was very much interested in pro-independence movement. I was part of Union of Independent Ukrainian Youth, Спілка Незалежної української молоді, СНУМ. I was not a member because they actually accepted people starting from the age of 14, and I was not. But they didn't mind me kind of having their company, although they could not understand how my parents allow me to do that. It was first open anti-Soviet pro-independence youth organization in Ukraine at the time. And me and two members of that organization, older school students, we tried to organize a strike in our school in support of the students' demands. And again, it was very ordinary school, so there was nothing very exceptional about it. But we managed to do that, more or less, to an extent, because at the end of the day, the school administration gathered the students of last years of school, and by stick and carrot, convinced them not to go on strike. But what they could not do, they organized the debates, actually, with us. First with these two older students who were poorly prepared. And I could not tolerate it, so I went to the front and said, "Look, debate with me." You know, Debate with me. There was a party organizer of the school, there was a director, there was a deputy director, and they debated with me. And they regretted it. Actually. Really, really, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it very much. You know, in the first years of school, I was a political informer. Like I had this, thing. I had to inform my class about political developments, like Iraq-Iranian war, or things like that in the first 2 years of school. You know, people who are 8 years old, they are so interested in these things. But I was. So we debated, and at the end of the day, the assembly, it turned into the assembly of students, actually. And we decided, okay, we won't go on strike, but we'll have an open public statement that our school supports student demands, and that we also will gather funds for their support, and something else I don't remember. Administration was quite unhappy. And in a few days' time, actually, the hunger strike came to an end, the victorious end. They won. And there was this rally at Maidan Nezalezhnosti. And we decided to skip classes for some reason. We decided to attend it while we were part of it. I also went to the students to be on duty, to do these things before, so some of them knew me. And we came, and while listening to the speakers from the stage, we suddenly realized that no one knows about our school statement. We decided to make a public statement, and public doesn't know about it. And it should be fixed straight away. And I said, well, I'll go and tell them. And my classmates said, yes, just you go. And I went, and to huge surprise of all these nice people, adults, they saw this cool kid who I want to have a say. Seriously, what about? Well, about our school. We supported students, and you don't know about that. And I said, okay, you can do that. Later on, my classmates told me that when you appeared in front of the mic, and the rally, the people there, they were really surprised, like, who is that? And then you started, Szanowni Panie I Panowie, which was totally un-Soviet way of addressing the audience, like very Ukrainian one. And we're like, oh, okay, it's our guy. That's fine. And I ended with Glory to Ukraine, which was regarded as, nationalistic at the time. But it was not regarded as such by us. So, yeah, it was impressive. But I had no idea, actually, that this is filmed, or at least that this film is preserved anywhere, until Radio Liberty, together with Public Broadcast, decided to make a documentary to the 30th anniversary of the students' hunger strike. And they included this part. And one of the producers of the film was my former colleague from television. And I thanked her on Facebook for this film. And she came back saying, well, you're welcome, but I didn't get it. Have you seen anyone you know? Because apparently they found this film and they wanted to include it, and they tried to figure out who this boy is, and they couldn't. And she came back saying, do you know this boy? I said, yes, I do. Yes, it was. And next year, when there was a documentary series about the collapse of Soviet Union, the authors included a protected version of it, but it was already titled Maksym Butkevych. And of course, when I said at the time, we know that this is just the beginning of the struggle for independence, I meant it, but I had no idea how long it will be and how bloody and tragic it will be. But yeah, well, we're still here. And on the second very difficult question, basically, there is an immediate answer I have when I hear these voices. And the answer is that those who advise us to just live under a different flag, they basically advise us to commit suicide. It's like, okay, you want like millions of people to die. Literally, physically, or mentally, or spiritually, or all at the same time, because it's not about changing the flag. It's not even about erasing one's identity and culture. It is about the worldview. And I kind of knew that before the captivity, but in captivity, I've seen it with my own eyes. There is such a striking difference in the worldview, in basic values, like in fundamental values. We have now, we treasure and try to support and develop, which I've mentioned already several times even tonight, human agency and freedom and dignity and respect, ability to change the situation, and they're very human to me. None of these I encountered inside the Russian system. Not only penitentiary, but respect towards human being, like dignity, human rights. You must be kidding me. In Russian Federation nowadays, okay. No, it's just very different world, totally opposite attitude towards human being, and totally different understanding what matters. Very different meanings, basically. We all live producing and supporting and spreading the fabric of meanings we produce every day in our everyday life. And we have totally different meanings. Our meaning, the main one, is human-related and freedom-related, and how we deal with each other, or how we treat each other. While meanings of the Russian world are etatist, they are statist, and they are all about the state machinery, imperial interests, well, state interests they call it, and national leader who is embodiment of both empire and its ideology. So this is just, a different world to me. And this advice to surrender is basically to eliminate everything we've done, we've achieved, we treasured in recent several dozens of years. And this, and also it won't be just in mental or spiritual realm. It will be very physical, because we understand that dozens, maybe hundreds of thousands of people will go to jail under occupation or be killed. And this is what's happening right in front of our eyes. So I'm afraid those who give these advices, either they don't understand it, and it means they don't understand anything about Russian invasion into Ukraine, or they don't want to understand it. Maybe they're uncomfortable thinking about it, but I don't know, it's already their motives. Yeah, that would be my answer, and upon some thinking, the second part of it would be that those who say it, they also have values. And actually, not many of them probably are ready to disregard their rights and their basic liberties and their freedom they enjoy without noticing it. And these are our shared values. So maybe they would just give them up for being fed and commanded, and this is it. No, this is not, this is something I try to repeat once and again. Those who treat it as Russian-Ukrainian distant story are very mistaken. It's not about Russia and Ukraine only. It is about values which are shared by all people who want to be, to live freely, in dignity and without fear. And yeah, we defend these values, not only Ukrainian territorial integrity. This is something I truly believe in.
And as they are saying, Russia is fighting against the West. This war leading against the West. Now we have time for two more questions. I see one hand and see second hand. Oh, okay, there is another mic.
Hello. Yeah. Just wanted to ask, because you have this activist background, about the significance of the horizontal networks and the self-organizing in the support for, let's say, for the military effort and such like. I'm involved in myself as well with this, getting cars and so on for the military, but more from the point of view of like the, how should I say, like the cultural or the ethical or the moral significance of it, rather than the like economic or military significance.
Thank you very much. I think it is extremely significant, and it is a Well, even in 2014, when a Russian invasion and occupation of part of Ukrainian territory started, openly in Crimea and as a proxy war in the east of Ukraine, we've seen this incredible volunteer movement which came up. And you know, I was part of campaigns, solidarity campaigns in different countries, in different places of Europe, not only Europe. And this was something I've never seen in my life. It is a historical phenomena. And nowadays it is much more powerful and important. It is extremely important economically, but I think it is even more significant from the political and ethical and identical point of view, because all this movement currently went out of the situation of, you know, extreme measures. It's not anymore that these are extreme measures where people had to do everything for next short period of time to support our guys at the front line. This is part of new normality. People live their lives supporting together, supporting our boys and girls, supporting our units, supporting our medics. I know people personally, not quite many of them, who start their day with donation if possible, if they can afford it. And they end their day with a donation. And it is just ordinary day. It all grows out of feeling of responsibility for what happens in the country. That society and community is responsible for our troops, for our defense, that the state is an important tool, but it's just a tool, while the overall agency and responsibility lies with society. And if you want something to be done, you should in the first place think how you personally are able to support it. So apparently it became a sign of it's an ageist remark, but like grown-up responsibility of Ukrainian society, that people, millions of people realized they are responsible. Not they don't say anymore that, you know, okay, this is the state responsibility, I won't interfere into that. No. I will force the state to do what it's got to do, but I will do everything in my powers to do that directly. A lot of this approach is some sort of direct democracy thing. I vote with my money, I vote with my own resources, with my time, with my energy to support this cause. And it became part of Ukrainian identity, cooperation, like when millions of people cooperate without knowing each other. A lot of it is built upon trust. When you go on social media and you see someone just asking, you know, we are repairing this car for our guys at Pokrovsk direction. So we need this amount of, like, this dozens of thousands of hryvnias. This is the account. And people whom you don't know at all, you've never met them in your life, they just go and donate you, and within a couple of days you have your car and you supply it to your boys. And this is normal thing, this is just everyday life thing, but it's all built upon trust and cooperation. So this is why also it is so important ethically and identically as well as economically and militarily. And it is incredible thing.
Actually, also Vachtan Kebuladze once said about the West and the European Union or Europe as itself, that the biggest value is the trust built in those societies. And I think it's very important, especially now when the right-wings parties are so stronger and gaining power, to recall again in this trust in each other and hold to this fight for this. And there was another question, the second one and the last one.
Hello, just want to join everyone in thanking you for being here. My question is about the role of memory and language during your time in captivity. I read that you worked for the BBC in the UK as a journalist for a while, and because of this, the Russians accused you of being a British spy. and you're clearly an excellent communicator in English. And, you know, during your time in captivity, you would have been spoken to in Russian, of course, very brutally. But the poetry of Vasyl Stus, it was in Ukrainian, and obviously his whole thing was about being Ukrainian and maintaining that identity. And because you were in prison for more than 2 years, and I guess you didn't have opportunities to exercise your knowledge of English, and perhaps not even in Ukrainian, I wondered what kind of, you know what I mean, like the relationship between memory and language, because you found yourself having to retreat into your memory and recalling things like poetry and things to rely on that for strength. So I wondered if you see any connections there, or how you maintained that.
Okay. No, thank you. The question is very good, and all the questions are good. You know, it make think, and they produce food for thought. There was a very clear connection between memory and language. The situation was a little bit better than it could be, because for some time I could use Russian only for several months. Communicating or talking to the guards and the interrogators and administration, of course it was Russian only. For some time I was held in a cell with Ukrainian civilian prisoners or Ukrainian POWs, but Russian-speaking ones, those from whose mother tongue is Russian, or everyday communication language was Russian. But then there were other POWs whose mother tongue was Ukrainian. They spoke Russian, they were forced to by the captors. But I've heard the accent, and I started to talk to them straight away in Ukrainian, and we switched from one language to another. And then we met more Ukrainian-speaking POWs, and well, when we were not controlled by the guards, we could speak Ukrainian, actually, in the colony as well, but quietly. I'm told nowadays quite often that I speak in lower voice than before my captivity, and this is true. This is a prison habit. You don't speak loud in prison without an extreme need. But we were able to speak Ukrainian sometimes, even though a couple of times it led to conflicts. When it comes to English, I was really worried about losing it. So first I started to compose opinion columns and, I don't know, speeches. I imagined myself to speak to the audience in English. Hello. Yes, it was what I dreamed of. It is what I dreamed of, actually, right now. It's happening. And this is the reality. I can sense it. But it was in order to not to lose the language. And later on, in one of the cells, we had English language classes or courses. I taught English to my cellmates. I never taught any language before. Actually, I was always very ignorant about grammar, for instance. And suddenly I realized how important it is if you are trying to teach someone, especially if you've got no textbooks or no texts or no paper, no pen, like nothing. You basically have bits and pieces of something to show the structure of the sentence, like filter from a cigarette and a burned match and a piece of card box. And you're like, okay, this is noun and this is verb and this you put here. See, this is how the question is formed. And it worked apparently. Well, as always with language courses, my cellmates became very enthusiastic. And then they realized that they have to learn, like to memorize. And no, they did not want to continue all but one. But that one was very persistent, very cool. And in a couple of months' time, he made significant progress. And he stated that upon our release, I should patent new way of learning English without, like, bare English, with nothing. And it helped a lot. And later on, in the colony already, I was imprisoned together with, among other people, other civilian or so-called political inmates. There were 2 acting OSCE officers who were tortured and sentenced for espionage. They are Ukrainian nationals, but they were recognized as OSCE acting officers by the so-called Supreme Court of Luhansk People's Republic. And one of them was actually OSCE translator. And we loved the rare opportunities to find a corner somewhere next to Barak to catch 10 to 15 minutes of speaking English to each other. I really treasured it. And also there were a couple of English language books which could be found, and of course I read them all. But there was at least some practice, but still I was afraid of losing it. And when it comes to memory and language, there was another thing. I used to speak French, and I lost it. The English just pushed it out. At some point, it destroyed it completely, as I thought. And suddenly, in Luhansk prison, French started to come back to me. It was one word, and then another one, and then I was able to compose a sentence, and then a short text. Et bon, ça a commencé de revenir. J'ai été vraiment très heureux. Et j'ai décidé que si je suis libéré, il me faut apprendre français comme il faut. So I really, thank you. So you know, it really like memory started to bring language. But later on, last point to say, in this strange collection of books in Penal Colony Library, I found this extremely interesting book on linguistics, published in 1968, I'm afraid, in Soviet Union, but it was very interesting. And one part of it was dedicated to one of the functions of language, which is not only about communication, not only about passing the message through in this very moment of time, but it is to keep the experience of previous generations and pass it with language to the next generations. And experience of very different kind, starting with historical events and ending with the very fact, for instance, that we all will die. The author said that we are probably the only species in the world who know that we are mortal, because this is knowledge which is passed via language, through language. No other species, as far as we understand that they are mortal. They know that others can die, but not them. We know different things. So language and memory, to me, are intertwined intrinsically. Like they really, language carries a message. And to me, it is a miracle. You know, it is something that helps us to try to reach the other person diachronically, like right now, or through time, or through space, through this gap between us. We try to reach each other with some miraculous tools, and language is one of them. So yes, to me, they are interrelated directly.
I think it could be the greatest ending point, but I will just ask a short question regarding of what and about what and with what we have started. In one of your interview, you said that in captivity, faith and a sense of meaning helped you. Who you are, what you can only reveal yourself through other people. Returning back to the term of Stus, feeling oneself with oneself. After the captivity, how you recreating, if you do, after captivity, with what you are feeling yourself, with yourself now?
I thought I will give a short answer because all the previous ones were so long, but it's not easy. Well, I think if something changed during the captivity inside of me, I mean, well, a lot of things changed, of course. But Yeah, I maybe just will repeat what you quoted, and this is something that unites captivity and the time after it. I think that the others, they have a different place in my world and in my life than before. They were always important to me, but never as important as now. On one hand, frankly speaking, in the last period of my captivity in the colony, I thought that if I am released, when I am released, if I could do whatever I like, I would just find, some distant corner, get in there, and I wouldn't see anyone, just anyone, no human beings around. Or maybe only those whom I want to see, and maybe only for some time, for time I want to see them. For a very obvious reason. In captivity, if you are not put in a solitary confinement, and I was not for some reason, you are never alone. Someone always watches you. You do everything together. When you are in the prison cell, you are in front of everyone else, whatever you do, including physiology, which takes a very important, big part of prisoner's life. And the same goes about colony. You sleep together, you work together, you eat together, you shit together, you do whatever together. You are never alone. Do you want it or not? So it was very natural, to be alone for some time. It never happened. Not yet, at least. At the same time, I realized that meeting other people, those whom I knew in person before the captivity, before this full-scale invasion, and those whom I have never met before, but who are so happy to see me, fills me with so much light and energy. And basically, I'm just reflecting what I'm given. And this is probably one of the main feelings I have now. And also, I have this weight on my soul that I am here in Berlin talking to you, and most of people whom I spend, nice people, like some of them are beautiful people, whom I spent my time with in recent 2 years and a half, they are in Vakhrushevo, Luhansk region, in penal colony number 2 still, or they are in Luhansk pretrial detention. It's not that I opted for it, it's not that I wanted it to be released before them, I wanted to be released. But it is not difficult, it is quite difficult, it's not easy. So trying to do whatever I can to get assistance for Ukraine and to get assistance and involvement for prisoners of war and civilian detainees is among my 1 or 2 or 3 priorities at the moment. And again, it's about the others who are so important to me now. So, yeah.
So there was the talk about the others to whom we are holding, for whom we are fighting. And definitely what to remember, the prison, it's not the best place to be. And that's why freedom should not be get it for granted or as a privilege. Freedom is something for what you are fighting, what you're protecting. Don't give up, hold together. Thank you, Maksym, for being us and being.
Thank you very much. Thank you.